Hello and welcome back excuse me, to our second demo video dealing with chapter 8, which is all about the master budget. So up to this point we already looked at questions 7, 8, and 9, right? We looked at the schedule of expected cash collections. We looked at doing the direct material budget, and we looked at production budget 8-2. So we looked at those three budgets in the master budget. So now we're going to finish up the process by looking at direct labor budget, manufacturing overhead budget, and then that selling and administrative budget as well. And I think we finish up with the cash budget in addition to that. Actually, no, did not. Yes, I did. Okay, so we'll go over that as well. So first thing we're going to look at is exercise 8-4, direct labor budget. So we're the production manager of Rorden Corporation. We submit the following quarterly production forecast for the upcoming year. So notice what we have here. We have the units to be produced. So quarter 1, 8,000, quarter 2, 6,500, third quarter 7,000, and the fourth quarter 7,500. Now they tell us that each unit requires 0.35 direct labor hours, and direct labor receive a rate of $12 per hour. So requirement 1 says, hey, use schedule 4 as your guide. Prepare the company's direct labor budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Assume that direct labor workforce is adjusted each quarter to match the number of hours required to produce the forecasted number of units produced. Okay, so right off the bat, not everyone's getting, guaranteed the same amount of hours. The direct labor cost varies with our production needs. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we got to figure out what are our required units. Well, there's not much figure in here because the problem tells us, right? 8,000 in the first quarter, second quarter is 6,500, third quarter is 7,000, and the fourth quarter is 7,500, and that gives us a total for the year of 29,000 hours. Okay, or I'm sorry, 29,000 units produced. Now keep in mind, these numbers that we got, required production in units, where did that come from? That came from our production budget. Okay, this problem didn't do one, they just gave us the numbers. But in the background, what we did on problem or exercise 8-2, how we created that budgeted sales, or the production budget, taking the budgeted sales and figuring out what are our production requirements. They already did that, and that's the number. These are the result of that. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, and let's go through the formula, so to speak, of how to calculate direct labor hours for each quarter. We got to start off with our required units in production, and then to that we're going to multiply. No, I don't want you. We're going to multiply the direct labor time per unit. We're going to do that in hours. Okay, they already told us in the problem that it takes 0.35 hours. So I'm just going to plug that in, right? 0.35, 0.35, plug it in all the way across. Okay, so now we multiply those to figure out what's the total direct labor needed. Direct labor hours. So I'm going to abbreviate that and say DLH, direct labor hours needed, to meet production. Well, that's easy. 8,000 times 0.35 gives me 2,800 hours. For the second quarter, same thing, 6,500 times 0.35, that gives me 2,275 hours. For the third quarter, 7,000 units times 0.35 hours gives me 2,450. And for the fourth quarter, 7,500 times 0.35 gives me 2,625. So that means for the year, I'm going to produce 29,000 units at 0.35 hours per unit. I get 10,150. Okay, good. Now we need to factor in the direct labor cost per hour. Now the problem told us that these people receive $12 per hour. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm just going to fill it in. $12 per hour. $12 per hour. $12 per hour. $12 per hour and $12 per hour. So now we're just going to multiply total direct labor hours needed by that hourly rate of $12. So we get the total direct labor cost for the first quarter, 2,800 times 12, 33,600. Same thing for the second quarter. We need 2,275 direct labor hours at $12 per hour, 27,300. And we do the same thing for third quarter, fourth quarter, and for the year. So I'm just going to fill these in. Oh, sorry, that's 29,400. For the fourth quarter, it's 31,500. And for the year, our direct labor costs are $121,800. Okay, pretty easy, right? Requirement 2, they throw us a little curveball. Okay, it says prepare the company's direct labor budget for the upcoming fiscal year, assuming that direct labor workforce is not adjusted each quarter. Instead, we have to assume that the company's direct labor workforce consists of permanent employees who are guaranteed to be paid for at least 2,600 hours for work each quarter. If the number of required direct labor hours is less than the 2,600, the workers are paid for 2,600 hours anyways. Any hours worked in excess of 2,600 hours in a quarter, we got to pay these people at a rate of 1.5 times the normal hourly rate of direct labor. Okay, so problem number 2, this is more of a real world example, right? We have people, maybe they're union, there's a contract, whatever, they're guaranteed, regardless of what they work, X amount of to be paid for X amount of hours. If they work over that, then they get overtime. Now, I made one tiny boo-boo. What I want you to do is to come down here to this last column under year and hit tab a couple times just to create a couple rows. I miscounted and didn't add the right amount. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to start off just like we did before, right? What are the required units? Okay, we have that up top. 8,000, 6,500, 7,000, 7,500, and 29,000 for the year. Okay, that didn't change. We still got to multiply it by we still got to multiply it by the direct labor time per hour. Okay, and that's still 0.35, didn't change. Still takes them the same amount of time to make a product. Okay, good. The total direct labor hours needed, guess what? That doesn't change, right? Total direct labor hours needed. Still the same, 8,000 times 0.35 still gives me 2,800. 6,500 units times 0.35 still gives me the same 2,275. Third quarter, still going to make 7,000 units, still takes 0.35 hours to make it. That's still 2,450. Okay. Fourth quarter, still going to make 7,500 units, still going to take 0.35 hour, or yeah, 0.35 of an hour to make it. So that's still going to be 2625. Okay. And it's still going to be the same, the total same for the year. These are our requirements. 150 is what we need. Okay. Now, here's where the twist comes in. We need to figure out what are the direct labor hours needed. We already have that. We already figured that out. But we have this little caveat that says, hey, they're going to get paid $2,600, or they're going to get paid for 2,600. They're going to get paid for 2,600 hours, regardless of what they work. If they work over 2,600, they get time and a half. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to put regular hours paid. Which is the 2,600 hours, right? Per quarter. That's what they're guaranteed. So that means, so they're guaranteed these for the fourth quarter, or for all 4 quarters. We're going to compare the regular hours with the total direct labor hours that we need, and we're going to see, is there any overtime? OT. Well, if we look at quarter 1, we need 2,800 hours. We're required to pay for, they're required to work 2,600. Anything over that, they get overtime. So they're going to get overtime on 200 hours. Okay? Second quarter, no overtime. We need 2,275. Guess what? They're going to get paid for 2,600. Doesn't matter. So no overtime. Third quarter, no overtime in the third quarter. We need a total of 24,500. Doesn't matter. They're going to get paid for 26, so there's no overtime. In the fourth quarter, we do have some overtime. We need 2,625 or 2,625 hours. Well, they're going to work 2,600 hours. Anything over that, we got to pay overtime. So that's 25 hours. So let's figure out what their regular wages are. Okay? To figure that out, we're just going to take the 2,600 times the $12. And if my math's right, that's 31,200. So each quarter, regardless of what they work, we're going to pay $31,200. So that means for the total year in regular wages, we're going to pay $124,800. Now we got to factor in that overtime. Okay? Very easy to do. We know that the overtime wages are at 1.5 times the $12 per hour. Okay? We know that's the overtime. So in the first quarter, we're going to have overtime that we have to pay of $3,600. Quarters 2 and 3, no overtime because they don't work overtime. In fact, they're making out. Our employees are making out. They're working less hours than they're getting paid for. I want that job, right? And then in the fourth quarter, we got to pay overtime for 25 hours, excuse me. So that 1.5 times $12 per hour times 25 should give me $450. That means in total we're paying overtime of $4,050. Okay, so what then is the total direct labor cost? Well, I just take my regular wages plus my overtime. So the direct labor cost for quarter 1 is $34,800 because I got to add the overtime to the regular hours. Quarters 2 and 3, my direct labor cost is $31,200, what they're guaranteed. Fourth quarter, I pay a little bit of overtime, $450. That means that the fourth quarter, my direct labor cost is $31,650. So my total costs for the year are $128,850. So because of the, say, a union, right? This is a managerial class, so we're going to assume we're going to take the stance that we're managers, we're anti-union, just for the class, just for the sake of this. I'm in no way bashing unions at all. We're just looking at it from a management point of view, right? We don't like unions because we're spending more money, right? We have to pay them overtime, which, no judgment call. We have to pay them overtime because it's required, right? In the first scenario, or part 1, we did not pay overtime. We paid a straight $12 per hour, and they only got paid for what they worked. Okay, so in the first quarter, notice that we were paying straight $12 per hour for 28 hours needed. Our costs are higher under scenario 2. Same thing for quarters 2 and 3, right? Our direct labor cost is lower because we're only paying our employees for what they work, which are the hours that we need. Under scenario 2 or part 2, they're guaranteed to be paid for 2,600 hours regardless of what they work. Okay, so we're in essence, from a management point of view, we're losing money, right? Because we're paying for our employees for work they're not doing, and anything above what we need, we're going to pay them more. Okay. All right. So the next one, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? This right here is exercise 8-5, and we're dealing with the manufacturing overhead budget. Super duper easy. Now, excuse me, before we jump into it, right? Remember, in order to do this manufacturing overhead budget, we have to do the direct labor budget. Why? Because our manufacturing overhead is based on direct labor hours. Makes sense? So let's just start with the formula. We need to know what are our budgeted direct labor hours. To that, we need to figure out what is our variable MOH rate. We multiply those two together and we get the variable, I'm going to say total variable MOH. To that we add the fixed manufacturing overhead, or fixed MOH. Then we add variable to the fixed. We get our total manufacturing overhead. Then we always have to subtract out less depreciation, because depreciation is a non-cash expense. We then end up with our cash disbursement for MOH. Okay? At the end of the day, when we're doing this manufacturing overhead budget, we're trying to figure out how much cash are we going to shell out for overhead, right? So that's why we have to subtract out depreciation, because again, it is a non-cash expense. Now, our publishers were so nice, and they didn't make us do a direct labor budget and then do a manufacturing overhead budget. They said, hey, well, they didn't say it, but basically they already did that, and they gave us the budget direct labor hours. And they tell us that the company uses direct labor hours as its overhead allocation base. Variable portion of the predetermined overhead rate is $3.25. Okay? So the variable portion is $3.25. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to fill in my chart. $3.25, $3.25, $3.25, $3.25, and $3.25. Okay? They tell us that fixed manufacturing overhead is $48,000 per quarter. Guess what? I'm plugging that in. 48,000. 48,000, 48,000, 48,000, and 48,000. Okay? They tell us that depreciation is $16,000 per quarter. That's the only non-cash item that's included in the fixed manufacturing overhead. Okay, I'm plugging it in. 16,000. 16,000. 16,000. Okay, now we need our budgeted overhead or budgeted direct labor hours. Well, they give it to us. In our problem in the chart, right? First quarter is 8,000. Second quarter is 8,200 direct labor hours we use. Third quarter is 8,500. Fourth quarter is 7,800. And if I add all these up, I get 32,500 for the year. Okay, so now I plugged in everything that I know, right? The biggest part of this was remembering what's that formula to remember or to calculate the manufacturing overhead. Well, direct labor or budgeted direct labor hours times the variable MOH rate gives us total variable MOH. Add in the fixed, we get our total. Subtract out depreciation, that's the cash disbursement. So the total variable MOH in quarter one is $26,000. 48,000 is our fixed manufacturing overhead. So I'm going to add those two. I get $74,000. I need to subtract out my depreciation of $16,000. That means that I'm going to spend $58,000 in manufacturing overhead for the first quarter. Do the same thing for the second quarter, right? Real quick, I know this might be boring and you're like, dude, you're saying the same thing over and over again. Yes. The only way to get this in our head is just that simple rote memorization, right? We could think about it, budgeted, direct labor hours, variable MOH, multiply those, I get the total, fixed, right? We can logically think through it. We're on a crunch time here, so to speak, right? We only got a week to get through this stuff. Got to remember it for a test. Again, rote memorization is the easiest way to get this crap in your head. It's not crap, it's good stuff. The only way to get this stuff in your head. So, for the second quarter, direct labor hours, 8,200, times the variable MOH rate, $3.25. Gives me $26,650. That is my total variable MOH. To that, I need to add the fixed manufacturing overhead of $48,000. That gives me $74,650. Guess what? Subtract out depreciation. Subtract out the $16,000, I get $58,000. $650. That is the cash disbursements for MOH. I'm going to do the same thing for the third quarter, $8,500. Direct labor hours that are budgeted times the variable MOH rate gives me total variable manufacturing overhead of $27,625. To the variable, I am going to add the total fixed of $48,000. That gives me a total of $75,625. I'm going to subtract out my depreciation of $16,000. I got $59,625. Same thing for the fourth quarter. I'm just going to plug these in and not bore you to death. 73,350. Subtract out my depreciation from my total MOH. I end up with 57,350. So in total, the total variable MOH for the year, 32,500 times 325, gives me 105,625. I add, I messed up. For the year, the fixed manufacturing overhead is $192,000 because that's 48 per quarter, right? Not 48 total. 48 times 4 gives me 192. The total MOH is the 105 plus the 192, should give me 297,625. Minus my total depreciation. Well, it's 16,000 per quarter times 4. That's 64,000 in depreciation. That means the total cash disbursements for the year for MOH is $233,625. Whew. Now, we need to figure out what is our predetermined overhead rate. Very easy for us to do. So what I'm going to do is, and you can do this as well, just put a couple lines, and we're going to say what is our total budgeted MOH for the year. And I want to color code this for a very simple reason. What is our total MOH for the year? It's not this. That's the cash disbursement, right? Total MOH includes depreciation. So the total MOH, which is right here, is $297,625. And just bear with me for a second. Okay, now I need to figure out what is the budgeted direct labor hours for the year. Well, that's easy. It's 32.5 because here's the budgeted direct labor hour for the year, 32.5. $32,500. Guess what? I'm going to divide these two and I get a predetermined overhead rate of $9.16. And that, my friends, is exercise 8-5. Now the last one we got to do is the cash budget. Okay, this is a pretty good example to do because this one, out of all the budgets, this one was probably the most in-depth. Okay, I did not assign the selling and administrative expense budget because it is identical to what we did here in the manufacturing overhead budget. Okay, so when you get to that problem in Connect, if you rewatch this video and you understand budgeted hours times the variable MOH rate, I get my total variable MOH. I multiply, or I add the fixed to the variable to get my total MOH. I subtract out my depreciation. That's how much cash disbursements are for the selling administrative. You're fine. Okay, so we're gonna skip to what have you, exercise 8-7. You know what? Skip 8-6. I'm going to take it out of here. Don't even worry about doing it. Okay, it's gone. You do not have to do that one. But I do want you to do exercise 8-7, right? This is our cash budget. Okay. Now, starting off, I do believe I have enough lines here. We might have to add a few. Now, this exercise 8-7 is on 394. Okay. And they give us Garden Depot. It's a retailer. We're preparing the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. We've prepared the following summary of budgeted cash flows. So they did the schedule for cash receipts. They did the schedule for cash disbursements. You already got practice on that by doing exercise 8-1 and 8-3, I believe. Okay. So they tell us that the company's beginning cash balance is 20 grand. They require a minimum cash balance at 10,000. They're going to borrow any amount needed from a local bank at an interest rate of 3%. The company may borrow any amount at the beginning of the quarter and may repay its loan or any part of its loan at the end of any quarter. Interest payments are due on any principal at the time it is repaid. For simplicity, we're going to assume that the interest is not compounded. Fantastic. If you're so inclined, you could pause the video. You can go in your book and look at Schedule 8, and you can try this yourself. If I were you, I would do that. But you don't have to, because we're going to go through it together. Okay? So, before we go any further, we need to get the formula, right? We're going to start off with, don't ask me why this says budgeted sales. That is not correct. That should not be there. We're going to start off with our beginning cash balance. And they tell us at the beginning of the quarter, we have $20,000 beginning cash balance. So we're going to plug that in. Okay. To that, we are going to add total cash receipts. Okay. Total cash receipts would come from our Schedule 1, that expected cash collections, right? That exercise 1 that we did. Okay. Now, total cash disbursements. They summed everything up for us in this problem. They said the total cash disbursements included the materials, so the raw materials purchase budget, the direct labor budget, because remember we have our cash flow from that. They did the manufacturing overhead budget, which shows the cash that we paid for overhead, and they did the selling and administrative budget, right, which shows the cash that we paid for selling and administrative. Now, in the lecture portion, we had all this broken down, right? We said materials, direct labor, MOH, selling and administrative. Here, we're just going to lump it all in as one. So this is the total cash disbursements. Okay. We then end up with the, actually, bear with me here. Sorry, it's getting late. Skip that. Total cash available. right? Beginning plus cash receipts is my total cash available. Then I subtract my less disbursements. Okay. Oh. That tells me if I have an excess or a deficit. Deficiency of cash. Okay. Then I end up with my financing, right? And financing, I'm going to borrow. And remember, I always borrow at the beginning of the quarter. Eventually, I'm going to have to repay whatever I borrow, and I'm always going to repay it at the end of the quarter. And then I have the interest. And remember, they said that our interest is 3%. 3%. Okay. Then I have my total financing. And then I have my ending cash balance. Okay, so this is kind of the formula that we're going to use. Okay, so right off the bat, total cash receipts, they give me those, right, for the first, second, third, fourth quarter. I'm just going to plug them in. So for the first quarter, cash receipts are $180,000. For the second quarter, they're $330,000. For the third quarter, they're $210,000. For the fourth quarter, they are $230,000. Okay, I end up with my disbursements. I know what my disbursements are. They tell me $260,000 in quarter one. Second quarter is $230,000. Third quarter is $220,000. Fourth quarter is $240,000. Okay. All right, so now we can, since we have all our data in, so to speak, we can go ahead and run through what we have. Okay, so let's look at quarter one. There we go. Let's look at quarter one. Quarter one says we started with $20,000 cash balance. To that, we received $180,000. That means we have $200,000 available. Okay, great. We now have a deficit. What is our deficit? Well, it's $60,000. That's okay. We can finance. We can borrow, right? So we're going to borrow from the beginning of the first quarter $70,000. Right? Wait a minute. We have an excess of, or we have a deficit of $60,000. Why are you borrowing $70,000? Because we require a minimum cash balance of $10,000. So I'm already 60 in a hole. I got to borrow the 60 to get out of the hole, and I got to borrow an extra 10 to set me at my company mandated 10% cash balance. Right? So the ending cash balance is $10,000. Okay. Quarter two. What's my beginning balance? Well, if I ended quarter one with $10,000, chances are I'm beginning quarter two with $10,000. Now I can figure out what are my cash available. In quarter two, I have $340,000 cash available to me. The $10,000 beginning balance plus the receipts. From what I have available, I need to subtract out the disbursements. Well, I only dispersed $230,000, meaning raw material purchases, direct labor cost, manufacturing overhead cost, selling administrative cost, totaled up to be $230,000. Great. Fantastic. That means I have $110,000. I have $110,000 excess, right? Guess what? I'm going to assume that I pay this back. I have enough cash to pay back what I borrowed and still have my balance remaining, right? The minimum 10,000. So I'm going to repay this. I'm going to pay back my $70,000 that I borrowed in quarter one. I'm going to pay it back at the end of quarter two. Okay? I got to calculate interest. The interest is a quarterly rate of 3%. Okay? So to figure this out, I'm going to take $70,000 times 3% times 2 for 2 quarters, because I borrowed it at the beginning of quarter one, paid it back at the end of quarter two. That's 2 quarters. That equals $4,200 that I'm paying out. So my total financing here is $74,200. Sorry, $74,200. So what is my ending cash balance now? Well, $110,000 minus the $74,200 that I repaid, $35,800. Third quarter. Guess what? I need my beginning cash balance. Well, if I ended quarter two at $35,800, guess what I'm starting quarter three at? $35,800 plus my cash receipts, $210,000. That means total available for the third quarter is $245,800. I need to subtract out my disbursements. $245,800 minus $220 leaves me with $25,800. I do not need to finance anything because my excess cash, after I factor in what I took in and what I paid out, is $25,800. That's my ending cash balance. So guess what I start the fourth quarter with? $25,800. Okay? Total available. Total cash available. Well, what I take in, $230,000 plus my beginning balance of $25,800 gives me $255,000, or $255,800. How much do I have after I take into account the disbursements? Disbursements were $240,000. I have $15,800. Okay? I don't need to borrow, right? I don't need to finance. I don't need to repay. I'm good. So my ending cash balance is $15,800. Okay? So now we got to figure out, what are our totals, right? Well, our totals here, if I started the year with $20,000 and I made sure that I always had a $10,000 beginning cash balance, right? My total has to be $20,000. Okay? So if we started the year with $20,000, we're going to end the year with $20,000. Okay? What are the total cash receipts? Well, I just add all those up all the way across, and that ends up being $950,000. Total cash available, well, must be $970,000. $950,000 plus $20,000. Total cash disbursements, again, I'm going to add all those up. That ends up being $950,000. How about $950,000? There we go. So what is my total cash available excess deficit over the period? We're going to make it $20,000. Okay. Total borrowed, well, that's $70,000. Total repaid is my $70,000. Total interest, well, that's $4,200. The total financing for the year has to be the $74,200. and the ending cash balance again is the 15,800. Okay, so we just carried that amount and carried it over here. Okie dokie. And that, my friends, is your study guide. So we went through all the budgets, right? Remember, we did skip 8-6. That was the selling and administrative. Again, it is just like the manufacturing overhead budget. Okay. So good luck. If you have any questions, please feel free and text me. If anything of this, any of this stuff is as clear as mud, text me. We'll have a phone call. We'll do a big blue button session and work it out. It's not a problem. Okay. It's getting late, so I will have that exam up. Probably not tonight. As I finish up here, it's getting kind of late. So I will have it up for you at the latest by Friday. You'll still have time to work on it. You'll still have 2 weeks from the time I put it up. Thank you for working with me. We'll get it in there. Don't worry. And if you have any troubles, you let me know. We'll fix them. We'll figure it out, and we'll get a workaround. Okay. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free and text me, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, and have a great night.